You've probably heard this before. Be authentic. Well, this sounds like great advice until it goes awry. And what we see in today's workplace is authenticity being used as an excuse for a lack of self awareness and emotional immaturity. We're going to break down how the overuse of the term authenticity is eroding professionalism and what true authenticity in leadership really looks like. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast helping leaders navigate defining moments with wisdom and strategy because how you lead through your crossroads determines the type of leader you become. I am your host, Shanita Brown. So thank you for joining me today. We're going to be calling out the authenticity trap. And today's brief is going to be on why the authenticity craze at work can actually undermine your career and what authentic professionalism looks like. Your company is paying you to operate within certain boundaries. And by that, what I mean is that they have standards, behavioral and otherwise, that you must meet. And some of these may preclude your authentic self if that devolves into bad behavior. So, what is the crossroads here? You might have been told to bring your authentic self to work, but lately you've started to think about this. Well, where's the line between authentic and unfiltered? Maybe you have caught yourself saying exactly what you felt in a meeting, and then later you realize, ooh, that did not go over well at all. Or you shared something personal and instantly wished that you hadn't. Maybe you've justified a blunt comment by thinking, well, I was just being honest. But deep down, you know that there's a difference between being real and being reckless. The real crossroads is this: how do you show up as your authentic self without crossing into unprofessional, defensive, or even emotionally reactive territory? You can be genuine and professional simultaneously. It is possible. Okay, so and if you have had an experience with this very thing, tell me about it for an upcoming Crossroads Spotlight. And this is where I share listener experiences and practical advice. So submit your story by clicking the link in the description. Who knows, your story might just help someone else who's navigating their own crossroads. So, who does this affect? If you thought that you may have crossed the line at work, all in the name of being true to yourself, then this definitely affects you and any professional tired of watching people hide behind the authenticity terminology to justify their unprofessional behavior. And so the stakes also, well, the authenticity trap does not just create uncomfortable moments. It can actually destroy workplace culture and damage relationships. And that's really what workplace culture is, right? And so then you've destroyed trust. And for some, okay, it might even be career ending. That's not what we want for you. So if you have confused authenticity with a lack of filter, you may not last very long in some professional environments. And if you're the leader who is tolerating it in the name of being real, okay, well, then congratulations. You've just created a toxic team. And this is going to be detrimental to you if you have the hopes of proving that you have the ability to build high performing teams, people who trust you, because there's a lot of movement, excuse me, going on in a lot of corporations where they're trying to get people to bond with one another so that they can move in the same direction because you have to have some buy-in, right? So what's the root issue? Well, the workplace went from leave your whole self at the door and be a corporate robot or just a widget to, now you just bring your whole self to work and just be who you are. And there's probably a lot to be said about that, but we're talking strictly within the context of not wanting to cross the professional lines, right? Both extremes can be problematic. So real authenticity is not about saying everything that you think or feel because quite frankly, everything should not be spoken. Everything that you think and feel should not be put out there for everyone to know. It just shouldn't. And really authenticity is about alignment between your values and your actions while still maintaining professional standards. So do you want to know if you're truly authentic or if you're just using it as an excuse? Well, look at how you show up under pressure. When the stakes are high and when you're frustrated and when things do not go your way, okay, well that's when your real character shows up and people really begin to see who you are. So when real authenticity does not crumble into unprofessionalism, then you know that you have the character to withstand those heavy things that are going to continue to come your way, because you shouldn't crumble when things don't go your way. If your authentic self only appears when you're uncomfortable and manifests itself as rudeness or a lack of boundaries, okay, well, that ain't authenticity. That's just poor self regulation dressed up as courage. And the only thing that you have earned at that point is a fast pass to a tarnished reputation, which is certainly something that you want to avoid. So, how does authenticity get misused? Well, I have a few things here. So number one, you might say, or you might hear people say, I'm just being honest. Okay, well, yeah, you might be real, but why would you want to put other people on Front Street and make them feel uncomfortable because you think that they need to hear something in those moments? Maybe they do need to hear it, but the way that you do it, the way that you go about presenting that information is going to matter. This is not honesty. This is rudeness disguised as directness. And if you have honesty without tact, it's just cruelty. So here's another misuse. This is just who I am. And sometimes you'll hear people say, well, I get emotional easily and people just need to accept that. Okay, you just made that all about yourself without any consideration for how you come across to people. And this is not to say that maybe what you need to share is not necessary, but you want to think through these kind of things. This is just really you refusing to regulate your behavior. And the reason why it's a trap is because professional settings require behavioral adjustment, not personality erasure. So you can still demonstrate your personality and express it. There's a way that you go about doing that. So, misuse number three, I need to share my truth. This is one I don't particularly care for because I've heard it many times. Share my truth. Well, no one really owns the truth, okay? But when you share whatever it is that you're attempting to express in those moments, you might actually be crossing the line because you might be oversharing. And you have to, again, have boundaries. And it's good to be vulnerable, but you have to understand, you have to exercise some wisdom as to how you apply that and when you express that vulnerability. You do not want to emotionally dump at work. It's just poor boundaries. And people will start to avoid you. And then misuse number four. Well, I just don't believe in corporate politeness. Have you ever said that or something along those lines or heard other people do the same thing? And kind of what that looks like is people they just skip the basic courtesy. You don't even get the baseline courtesy. They skip all the pleasantries. They just barge into your office. They don't ask you how you're doing. They just start making demands. That's what that looks like. Nobody, nobody appreciates that. Professional courtesy is not fake. It's simply respecting your colleague. And the reason why this is a trap is because manners and authenticity are not mutually exclusive of one another. You can still be courteous to people and demonstrate your true self. All right. So, the real problem here, authenticity has been weaponized. And how it's weaponized is helps people to avoid accountability. So when you say, I'm just being authentic or I'm just being me, what that often means is I don't want to regulate my behavior or consider how it affects others. And when someone says they're uncomfortable with your behavior, suddenly they're the problem. They're just too sensitive or they can't handle honesty. Okay, well, really, all you've done is gaslighted somebody. And you have flipped the script so that your lack of self regulation becomes their failure to accept them. People don't have to accept it. Real authenticity does not require everyone else to suffer for your self expression. There is a way that you can express yourself without um, costing everyone else their sanity and their peace of mind. So, here's some critical questions that I want you to ask yourself. Am I using authenticity as an excuse to avoid professional standards? Here's a second question. Is my authentic self making other people's work lives harder? If you are the person that everyone turns the other direction to miss, okay, well, you might have a problem. And then here's a third question. Would I want to work with someone who behaves the way that I do? Now, that's the question that should make you stop and look in the mirror. All right. So what options do we have as we think about authenticity and how that plays out? Okay, so we have three approaches here. Option A, use authenticity as a shield for bad behavior. Now, I think we recognize on the surface that this is not a viable option. And okay, it's seemingly you might get to say whatever you want, and you get to just kind of be free and avoid any self-regulation. But what you're doing is you're damaging relationships and you're destroying credibility. And quite frankly, you're limiting your career growth. Because if there are any leaders in positions uh, to have some type of authority to hire in maybe some areas where you might want to go that you think are in your trajectory, well, they can squash that like a bug, and then you have nothing. You would actually have to leave the organization if they don't, terminate first. So the reality is, this is basically uh, career suicide. So let's stay away from that one. So here's the second option: suppress everything so that you can seem like you're quote unquote professional. Okay, well, it might look like you're avoiding conflict and that you don't offend anyone. But let me tell you, even when you don't say something, that could still come off as offensive depending on who the person is or depending on the context, right? So, you don't want to become robotic and lose connection. You want people to trust you. So when you overcorrect like this, it makes you disconnected and people just stop paying attention to you. So you don't want that either. That's just on the other side of it. So that's not viable either. So then the third option is demonstrate mature professionalism. The pros to this is that you're going to build genuine relationships and you will not only build credibility, you will maintain it. And people will begin to trust and respect you. This does require that you have self awareness. You have to have self awareness. This is imperative. And it also requires that you have some emotional intelligence and that you be able to exercise some discipline. But the great thing about this is that as a mature person, you will be able to navigate professional relationships with a lot more ease because you will come off as the utmost professional. People will be glad to see you participate in their meetings. They will look forward to having you in their space. That's the direction where you want to go. So, what does mature professionalism actually look like? Well, principle number one, you have to recognize that self awareness is greater than self expression because when you are able to read the room, then you know how to make an adjustment. And sometimes the adjustment is uncomfortable because you feel compelled to say something. You will have to exercise some discernment in whatever context where you're operating. That's what that's going to require. And sometimes you might have to circle back and address some things, but just understand that maybe now is not the time to blurt out that this presentation is horrible. Maybe you have that conversation in the quiet of the office, after the meeting or a couple of days after the meeting. Just be aware of that. So the action that I want you to take is to think before you speak and ask yourself, what is my intention and what might be the impact if I express this particular thought or feeling in this context? Principle number two, emotional regulation is a leadership skill. This is where really your emotional intelligence comes in. You can feel whatever you want. You just should not express everything that you want. All right, all right. So just be aware of that because again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, everything that you think and feel should not be voiced out in the open. That's not to say that you shouldn't have the opportunity to share those things, but again, context matters and know your audience. So I want you to practice the 10-second pause before reacting emotionally. And sometimes it happens within a split second. You feel something, and before you know it, you've just put it out there. Well, this is where that self regulation comes in. Principle number three, context matters. So, what's appropriate with your best friend is not appropriate with your boss. And I don't want to say that it's always not appropriate because only you know your relationship with your boss. You kind of take some cues from them as well. So, just exercise some awareness about that. Authenticity adapts to the context without betraying values. So just because you make some minor adjustments does not mean that you have betrayed yourself. So your action is to make sure that you read the room before you start keeping it real. Principle number 4, boundaries are part of authenticity. You cannot be authentic without boundaries. You do not owe everyone access to all of your thoughts and feelings. It is not for them. It's not their burden to bear, number 1. And and truly, not everyone will do the right thing with certain pieces of information that you share with them, which is why it's so important to exercise discernment when you're sharing anything. So the action that I want you to consider is to have a personal litmus test for what you share and with whom, because everyone is not to be trusted. And when you're sharing information, you also just want to ask, is this information going to be helpful, relevant, and appropriate? Okay. Principle number 5, direct communication does not equal brutal communication. You can be direct with people without it being harsh. Okay, you hear people say, "Well, that's just brutally honest." That's because they've given a little bit of extra that might not have necessarily been required in order to get the point across. Be tactful when you're talking to people. All right, and so ask yourself if you're able to express something clearly and kindly. Just a little bit of kindness adds a little sweetness to it. And sometimes that's what's necessary. Again, you just have to discern what that situation is. So, the action that you should take in this particular regard is to practice delivering hard truths with respect. And how you can do that is you can simply say, well, here's what I'm observing about this particular situation, or this is the concern that I have, or this is what I would propose. It does not have to be brutal. So ask yourself this. This is just a little test that you can give yourself to help you to understand if your professionalism is authentic and mature. Am I being true to my values? That's going to be authentic, right? Am I considering context and impact? That's where your professionalism shows up. Am I regulating my delivery? This is going to demonstrate your maturity. And would I want to work with someone who acts like this? That's your reality check. So when you consider those, that will help you to gauge where you are professionally and if you're being authentic. So, what does this look like over the next 30 days? Well, you want to give yourself a little bit of an audit. So, the first week, you want to notice when you and or others use authenticity as an excuse. So, when you hear people say, "Well, I'm just being honest," or "I'm just saying," or "That's I'm just being true to myself." Well, those are some uh, clues that hey, they might just be operating out of their emotions, and maybe we need to take a step back. So if this is you, recognize that so that you can pull that as away as an excuse for justifying that behavior, because if it turns out that it's unprofessional, it's going to work against you and not for you. So week 2, I want you to practice the 10-second pause before you just blurt out whatever honest opinion that you think that you might share. Just consider it before you do it. Week 3, identify one area where you overshare or underregulate. Consider boundaries and how important those are. And then week 4, get feedback. Ask some of your trusted colleagues, do I come across as genuine and professional? And what are some of the things that you should recognize to determine if you've made some strides and have some success? Well, number 1, you can be direct without being destructive. That definitely is a good sign. And then a second thing that you can look to is you'll see that people will begin to trust you because you're consistent and not unpredictable. So if you've been in situations where you kind of felt like you had overshared, or you had expressed something that later turned out to, in your estimation, maybe turned out to be unprofessional, well, people will begin to recognize a difference in you, and you should start to receive that feedback if you're making some really good strides in that direction. And then another thing that you'll see that you can say is a success is you have some genuine relationships with your colleagues. and you have professional credibility. And these are the things that are going to assist you as you continue on in your career trajectory. If you're leading people, people will begin to see a difference. And if you're wanting to get into leadership, people will recognize that you are someone that they would like to work with and that they wouldn't mind having on their team and directing some of their team members. Okay, so then what is the bottom line of this? Authenticity without professionalism is just bad behavior. That's point blank. So real authenticity means living your values while respecting context, impact, and other people. And what is the risk level? Well, I just think that with a lot of the things that we discuss, this is pretty high because this is something that engages people and your behavior, just like other people's behavior, can either add value and add life and light into the room, or it can suck the life right out of it. You want to be the one who adds value, adds life, adds light. All right. So leaders who hide behind authenticity to avoid professional standards, you're going to struggle. And I do not want you to struggle. So the decision timeline, this is something that you should start working on this week. If you have ever found yourself, just saying, well, this is just me, this is just who I am, and you use that as justification for behavior, then you recognize that it is time to reassess where you are and how you think about things and how you express them so that you can put that behind you and really be true to who you are. And who you are, you're going to have some high character for this. So I hope that that was helpful. And for next week's episode, we're going to be talking about why leaders avoid change and really how this is destroying your teams. And as we close out, be sure to subscribe to the Catalyst for weekly insights and just some simple reminders to put your plan into action because I don't want you to forget that you need to make a change. All right. And the most authentic thing that you can do is to take responsibility for your impact on other people. That is not being fake. That's being a grown up. That's being mature and that's demonstrating mature professionalism. So until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll see you next week for your next executive brief.